The shelter was quieter than usual that afternoon, the kind of quiet that settled gently into the corners of the room. Sunlight filtered through the narrow windows, landing in soft squares on the concrete floor. Volunteers moved slowly, speaking in hushed tones, as if the dogs could feel the weight of waiting. He lay in the far kennel, curled tightly against the metal bars, his head resting on his paws. He didn't bark when footsteps passed. He didn't lift his head when voices called softly. For weeks he hadn't done much of anything at all. Then the door opened. At first no one noticed the change but him. His ears twitched. His body stiffened. Slowly, almost cautiously, he raised his head. His eyes fixed on a woman standing near the entrance, brushing rain from her coat. The dog stood up, muscles tense, tail low. A low whine escaped his chest. Not fear, not excitement, but something in between. As the woman took a few steps forward, the dog pressed himself against the gate, then suddenly backed away, pacing in tight circles. He pawed at the floor, then stopped, staring straight at her. When a volunteer tried to clip a leash onto his collar, he refused to move, planting his feet with quiet determination. The woman felt it, that strange pull in her chest, the sense of being seen by an animal that didn't even know her. She hesitated, unsure why her hands were trembling. Everyone thought the dog was afraid, but the way his eyes never left her told a different story. Because what the dog sensed was far from ordinary. Before we continue, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more heart-touching dog stories. And tell me, where are you watching from? The shelter always smelled the same in the early afternoon. Clean, faintly metallic, with a lingering trace of wet fur and disinfectant that never fully went away. It was a quiet hour, the space between morning visitors and the afterwork crowd. Volunteers moved gently, their footsteps softened by habit. A radio murmured low near the front desk, some familiar song no one really listened to. In the far kennel, he lay curled against the bars. Not sleeping, just still. His body was lean but strong, the kind shaped by endurance rather than comfort. A short brown coat worn thin in places. One ear folded slightly at the tip, as if it had never healed quite right. His eyes, dark, steady, followed movement without much expectation. People stopped in front of his kennel all the time. Families, couples, children pressing fingers through the bars. Some smiled at him. Some frowned. Most lingered for a moment, then moved on. He rarely reacted. No barking, no jumping, no hopeful wag. Just quiet watching. "He's a good dog," one volunteer said softly to a woman near the aisle. "Really gentle. Just selective." Selective was the word they used when hope had worn thin. The dog shifted slightly, stretching his front legs before settling again. His tail lay still against the concrete. The sounds of the shelter drifted around him, distant nails clicking, a single bark echoing from another wing, the hum of the ventilation system. He'd been here a long time, long enough to learn the rhythm. Doors opening, voices rising with excitement, leashes clipped on, and then absence. He had seen dogs leave before, watched kennels empty and fill again, watched joy happen for others without resentment, only a quiet awareness that it wasn't his turn. When someone stopped in front of him now, he didn't lift his head right away. He waited, listened, measured. A man crouched down, snapping his fingers gently. "Hey buddy," he said. "Want to go for a walk?" The dog's ears flicked. His eyes met the man's. Then slowly he looked away. The man sighed, standing again. "See," he said to the volunteer. "He's not interested." The volunteer nodded, already used to this outcome. "Yeah, he does that." They walked off, footsteps fading down the aisle. The dog exhaled softly through his nose. A long, quiet breath. He didn't want to disappoint anyone. That wasn't it. He just knew. Somewhere inside him, deeper than thought, was a sense he trusted more than voices or gestures. A feeling shaped by things he couldn't explain. Things that lived in muscle memory and instinct. If it wasn't right, he stayed. The shelter door opened again near the front. A brief rush of outside air swept through. carrying the scent of rain and cold pavement. The sound of traffic followed, distant but alive. The dog's ears twitched. Not fully. Just enough. He didn't lift his head yet. A volunteer glanced toward the entrance. "Looks like someone else came in," she murmured. The dog shifted his weight. His breathing changed, subtle but present. Slightly faster. More aware. He raised his head an inch. The door closed behind the newcomer with a soft click. Footsteps moved inside. Slower than most. Measured. Hesitant. The dog's eyes focused now. He stood. Not suddenly. Not nervously. Just deliberately. His paws pressed against the concrete as he stepped forward, stopping inches from the kennel door. His posture straightened, tail still low but no longer resting. His ears angled forward, attentive, alert. Something had changed. The volunteers didn't notice right away. They were used to noise. Used to motion. But this was different. Quiet. Contained. The dog leaned closer to the bars, nostrils flaring slightly as he breathed in. Rain. Fabric. Something familiar. And something missing. A sound rose in his chest. Not a bark. A low, uncertain whine. He stilled himself immediately after, as if surprised by his own reaction. Down the aisle a woman paused. She hadn't planned to stop there. She'd only meant to look. To walk through. To pass time before heading home. But she felt it. That pull. The subtle sense of being watched, not with demand but recognition. She turned her head. Their eyes met. The dog froze. So did she. For a moment the shelter seemed to fade. The sound softening, the movement slowing, as if space itself had drawn a quiet breath. The woman's hand tightened around the strap of her bag. Her chest felt heavy. Not unpleasant. Just full. The dog stepped back once. Then forward again. His tail gave the smallest movement, not a wag, not yet, just a shift. A volunteer noticed. "Oh," she said quietly. "Well, that's new." The dog pressed closer to the gate, ears forward, gaze fixed. His body trembled slightly. Not fear, not excitement, but something deeper, harder to name. The woman swallowed. "I think," she began, then stopped. Unsure why her voice felt unsteady. The dog sat. Waited. And for the first time in weeks he didn't look away. Because whatever he sensed standing there, whatever invisible thread had just tightened between them, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't letting her walk past. Not this time. The woman stood there longer than she meant to. She told herself it was nothing, just curiosity. Just the way his eyes held hers without blinking. Just the quiet of the shelter making everything feel heavier than it was. Still she didn't move. The dog remained seated behind the bars, posture straight, head level. His breathing was steady now, but his ears stayed angled forward, tracking every small shift she made. When she adjusted the strap on her shoulder, his gaze followed the movement. When she leaned slightly to the left, he leaned too, mirroring her without realizing it. "That's unusual," the volunteer said softly, stepping closer. "He doesn't usually sit like that for strangers." The woman let out a slow breath. "He looks like he's waiting," she said. The volunteer smiled faintly. "That's one way to put it." The dog's tail moved again, just once. A gentle sweep against the floor. Not excitement. Recognition. The woman crouched down instinctively, her knees stiff from the motion. As soon as she lowered herself, the dog's body shifted. His chest pressed closer to the gate. His head tilted slightly, one ear folding more than the other. A soft sound escaped him. Not a whine this time. More like a breath with feeling behind it. She felt it land somewhere deep in her chest. "It's okay," she said quietly, unsure who she was reassuring, him or herself. "Hey there." The dog leaned forward until his nose nearly touched the metal bars. He inhaled slowly, carefully, as if committing her scent to memory. Rainwater. Soap. The faint trace of something old and familiar that tugged at a place inside him he didn't fully understand. His tail began to move, slow, cautious arcs. Behind them, another couple walked past the kennel. The dog didn't look. He didn't glance toward the sound of voices or the squeak of shoes. His attention stayed locked, unwavering. The volunteer's brow furrowed. "He's been passed over a lot," she said. "Usually he shuts down when people get close." The woman nodded, still crouched, fingers resting against her knee. "Well," she said quietly, "he doesn't feel shut down." As if responding to her words, the dog shifted his weight, then stood again. He turned in a small circle once, then stopped, facing her directly. His posture was alert now, purposeful. He lifted one paw, then set it down again. The volunteer reached for a leash hanging nearby. "Would you like to meet him outside the kennel?" she asked. "We can see how he does." The dog noticed the movement instantly. His ears flicked back. His body stiffened. When the volunteer stepped closer to the gate, he moved between her and the woman, subtly but clearly, positioning himself so his body blocked the volunteer's approach. He didn't growl, didn't bare his teeth. He simply stood firm. Everyone paused. "Oh," the volunteer murmured. "Okay, that's new too." The dog glanced back at the woman, eyes searching her face. His tail lowered, but his stance remained steady. She felt a strange pressure behind her ribs. "He's not being aggressive," she said quickly, though no one had suggested it. "It feels more like he's asking." The volunteer nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "That's what it looks like." She took a step back. The dog relaxed a fraction, shoulders easing. He let out a quiet breath, almost a sigh. The woman rose to her feet slowly, testing the moment. When she stood, the dog's head lifted with her. When she stepped back, his tail stilled. And when she stepped forward again, it resumed its slow rhythm. Connection. Unmistakable. A child's laughter echoed from another aisle. Somewhere a door slammed gently. Life went on around them, unaware that something fragile and important was unfolding in a narrow corridor of kennels. "Do you want to take him to the visiting room?" the volunteer asked. "Just to sit with him?" The woman hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she admitted. "I didn't come here planning to." The dog whined. Soft. Short. Intentional. He lowered his head briefly, then lifted it again, eyes never leaving hers. Her throat tightened. She nodded once, almost without thinking. "Okay," she said. "We can try." The volunteer moved carefully this time, opening the kennel door slowly. The sound of the latch echoed louder than it should have. The dog didn't bolt, didn't hesitate. He stepped out, calmly, deliberately, then stopped in front of the woman. Waited. She reached out instinctively, then paused, hovering her hand inches from his head. "Is that okay?" she asked. The volunteer smiled. "I think he's already decided." Her fingers brushed his fur. Warm. Slightly coarse. Real. The dog leaned into the touch immediately, pressing his head gently against her palm. His tail began to wag, still slow but fuller now. More confident. Then, without warning, he stepped forward and positioned himself directly in front of her legs, blocking her. Not pushing. Not forcing. Just standing there, solid and sure. The woman laughed softly in surprise. "Well," she said, "I guess that answers something." The dog looked up at her, eyes steady, ears relaxed. He had found her, and he wasn't letting her go, not until she understood why. The visiting room was quiet in the way places meant for careful decisions often are. A small space, neutral walls, a single bench by the window, its paint chipped smooth by years of waiting hands. The dog stood just inside the doorway, leash loose against his collar. He didn't pull, didn't resist. He simply stayed close, close enough that his shoulder brushed the woman's leg every time she shifted her weight. The volunteer closed the door gently behind them. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be right outside." The latch clicked. The dog's ears flicked at the sound. His head turned briefly toward the door, then back to the woman. Always back to her. She sat on the bench slowly, palms resting on her knees. The room smelled faintly of cleaning spray and old wood, warmed by sunlight coming through the narrow window. The dog remained standing, watching. "You can sit," she told him softly, patting the floor. He didn't. Instead, he took a step closer, then another, until his chest was nearly touching her knees. His tail was still now. Not tense, just focused. She hesitated, then reached out, resting her hand against his shoulder. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing beneath her fingers. Strong, controlled, intentional. "He's guarding." The volunteer's voice came faintly through the door. "Some dogs do that when they're stressed." The woman nodded, though something about that explanation didn't sit right. He didn't feel stressed. He felt present. Another volunteer passed by the door, peeking in through the glass. "That's the one who doesn't like being chosen, right?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," came the reply. "He usually freezes up. Or turns away." The dog lifted his head slightly, ears angling toward the voices. Then, without any sign of agitation, he shifted his body just enough to place himself more squarely between the woman and the door. A barrier. Calm. Measured. Deliberate. The woman's heart beat faster. "He's not scared," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "He's making a decision." She leaned back slightly, giving him space. The dog immediately adjusted, stepping forward to close the gap again. Not crowding, just ensuring proximity. She smiled despite the tension rising in her chest. "Okay," she whispered. "I hear you." The dog finally sat. Not at her feet, but angled toward the door, eyes forward, ears alert. A watchdog's posture. The volunteer opened the door partway. "He seems very focused on you," she said. "But sometimes that can turn into resource guarding." The word landed heavier than it should have. The woman's smile faded. "I'm not something to guard," she said gently. The dog turned his head at the sound of her voice. His ears softened. His gaze warmed. He rose again slowly, and moved so he stood directly in front of her knees. Then he looked up at her face. And waited. Her breath caught. This wasn't anxiety. It wasn't dominance. It wasn't fear. It felt like recognition layered with urgency. She thought of the way he had blocked the volunteer earlier. The way he'd reacted the moment she'd stepped back. Like he was afraid of something else reaching her first. "Maybe he's just overstimulated," another voice said outside. "Some dogs latch onto the first person who gives them attention." The dog's tail swayed once. He didn't look at the door. He didn't look at anyone else. His attention stayed anchored, steady as a compass needle. The woman placed her hand flat over her chest, surprised to find her heart racing. "I didn't come here to adopt," she said quietly. "I don't know why I'm here." The dog responded by lowering his head slightly. Not submission, not sadness, but a softening. A quiet acknowledgement. Then he did something unexpected. He turned away from her, walked 2 steps toward the corner of the room, paused, looked back. An invitation. Her brows knit together as she stood slowly and followed him. He stopped near the baseboard, nose hovering over a faint scratch mark in the paint. He sniffed once, then sat, and waited. The woman crouched beside him, studying the spot. "What is it?" she murmured. The dog didn't move, didn't point, didn't paw. He simply remained, eyes shifting between the mark on the wall and her face, as if asking her to notice. A volunteer opened the door again, concern etched across her face. "Are you okay in here?" she asked. "He's very intense." The woman looked up. "I think," she said slowly, "we're misunderstanding him." The dog's ears perked. His tail tapped the floor once, a quiet, hopeful sound. Whatever he was reacting to, it wasn't the room, it wasn't the leash, and it wasn't fear. It was something the humans hadn't seen yet, something waiting to be remembered. The misunderstanding followed them out of the visiting room. It lingered in the way the volunteers spoke more carefully now, in the extra space they gave the dog, in the glances exchanged when he stayed close, closer than protocol preferred. They moved into the small outdoor yard behind the shelter, the concrete still damp from the earlier rain. The air smelled clean here, washed thin by water and wind. A few leaves clung stubbornly to the chain-link fence, rattling softly when a breeze passed through. The dog stepped outside first. He paused, lifted his nose, inhaled deeply. His body shifted the moment the leash slackened. His ears flicked back and forth, tracking distant sounds, a passing car, a door closing somewhere down the street, the faint echo of a siren far away. Then he stepped directly in front of the woman, stopped, blocked her path. Not abruptly, just enough that she had to stop too. She looked down at him, surprised. "Oh," she said softly. "Okay." The volunteer hesitated behind them. "He's not supposed to do that," she said gently. "He might be getting overwhelmed." The dog didn't react to the comment. His eyes stayed forward, his posture grounded, his tail low but relaxed. He took a half-step sideways, still in front of the woman, adjusting himself so his body remained aligned with hers as she shifted her stance. A shield. The woman felt a slow ripple of unease move through her chest. Not fear but awareness. "He's checking something," she said. "Or listening." As if to confirm her thought, the dog stilled completely. No movement. No sound. He stood like that for several seconds, muscles firm beneath his coat. His ears angled forward, then back, catching something too subtle for human senses. Then he exhaled, stepped aside. The woman took a step forward. So did he. Always together. They walked the length of the yard that way, the dog pausing when she paused, stopping when she stopped, turning when she turned. Each time another volunteer approached, his body shifted, not threatening, not tense, just positioned. Between. "He's unusually protective," one volunteer whispered to another. "I don't like how fixated he is." The woman heard it. Her shoulders tightened. "I don't feel threatened," she said calmly. "I feel watched over." The dog glanced back at her at the sound of her voice. His eyes softened. His tail gave a small, reassuring wag. Then a man entered the yard from the side gate, a potential adopter, leash in hand, smiling kindly. The dog noticed instantly. His posture changed. Not aggressive but alert. He stepped in front of the woman again, firmer this time. His body angled slightly toward the newcomer, stance wide and steady. The man stopped short. "Oh, sorry, buddy," he said. "Didn't mean to crowd you." The dog didn't move, didn't bark, didn't growl. He simply held his position. The volunteer stepped forward quickly. "It's okay," she said to the man. "He's working through something today." The man nodded and backed away. Only then did the dog relax, just a fraction. The woman's heart pounded now. "This isn't normal," she said quietly. The dog looked up at her. His ears tipped back. His gaze searched her face, as if measuring her reaction. Then he did something that made her breath catch. He leaned into her legs. Full contact. Grounding. A silent request. She reached down without thinking, resting her hand against his neck. His fur was warm from the sun, damp still near the collar. "It's okay," she whispered. "I'm here." The words felt strange in her mouth, as if she were reassuring herself as much as him. The tension followed them back inside. As they passed through the kennel aisle, the dog slowed, then stopped, directly beside his old enclosure. He refused to move. The leash stayed loose in the volunteer's hand, but his paws were planted firmly against the concrete. The woman turned to him. "What is it?" He looked at the kennel, then at her. Then carefully, he positioned himself so his body blocked the open aisle beyond. A decision. "He doesn't want to go back in yet," the volunteer said, uncertain. "But he can't just." The dog whined softly. Once. Low. Controlled. He didn't pull. Didn't panic. He just stayed. The woman crouched beside him, her heart racing. "Are you asking me to stay?" she murmured. The dog's tail moved. Slow. "Sure." A volunteer approached with another leash, hoping to redirect him. The moment she did, the dog stepped closer to the woman, pressing his side against her leg, anchoring himself there. His breathing quickened slightly. This was different. Urgency without fear. The room seemed to hold its breath. "He's never done this before," someone said. "He usually shuts down when he's confused." The woman swallowed hard. "He's not confused," she said. "He's certain." She stood slowly, testing him. The dog rose with her. She took one step toward the exit. He moved with her. She took a step back toward the kennel. He stopped. Would not follow. Her chest tightened. Whatever invisible line he was drawing, it didn't include leaving her alone. The volunteers exchanged looks, concern mixing with curiosity. And somewhere beneath the growing tension, a question began to form. What was this dog protecting her from? Or what was he trying to lead her toward? The answer hovered just out of reach. And the dog knew it. They moved into the small office near the back of the shelter, not because it was planned, but because no one quite knew what else to do. The dog walked in first, paused, surveyed the room, then stepped aside so the woman could enter. The space was cramped and functional. A metal desk stacked with folders, a bulletin board crowded with faded flyers, the hum of an old computer fan filling the silence. A narrow window looked out toward the road, where cars passed in a steady, indifferent stream. The dog stopped in the center of the room. His posture shifted again. Ears forward, head slightly lowered, tail still. He wasn't guarding now. He was searching. The woman felt it immediately. That tightening beneath her ribs, the sense that they were standing at the edge of something important. One of the volunteers closed the door gently. "Let's just slow this down," she said. "He's clearly trying to communicate something." The dog turned at the sound of the door, watching it latch. Then he looked back at the woman, checking. She nodded without realizing it. "I'm okay," she whispered. The dog exhaled. Relief. He moved toward the window, nose lifting as he sniffed the air drifting in through the cracked frame. His body stilled again, muscles tightening as something registered. A sound, faint, almost lost beneath the traffic. A siren far away but unmistakable. The dog froze. Every muscle engaged at once. His ears locked forward. His head turned slightly, tracking the sound as it faded and rose again, distorted by distance. The woman felt a chill move up her spine. "He hears something," she said. "He always does," the volunteer replied absently, then paused. "Wait." The dog turned sharply toward the desk. He stepped closer, lowered his nose, sniffed the air around the drawers. Once, twice. Then he sat, right beside the desk, and waited. The woman approached slowly, kneeling beside him. "What is it?" she murmured. The dog didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the desk, more specifically on a manila folder sticking out slightly from the bottom drawer. A name was written across the tab in thick black ink. The woman's breath caught. It was her name. She stared at it, confusion flooding her face. That's not possible," she said quietly. The volunteer frowned. "That's his intake file," she explained. "We keep them there when someone's being evaluated for long-term placement." The woman reached out with trembling fingers and pulled the folder free. Inside were photographs, reports, dates. Her knees weakened as she lowered herself to the floor. The dog shifted immediately, pressing his side against her leg, grounding her, steadying her. She flipped through the pages slowly. A photo stopped her breath entirely. A younger version of the dog stared back at her, leaner, eyes sharper, wearing a working harness. Beside him stood a man in uniform. Her husband. Her hand flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered. No. The volunteer's voice softened. "You recognize him." The woman nodded, tears blurring the page. "He was a K9, she said. "Search and rescue. My husband trained him." The room seemed to tilt. The dog turned his head at the sound of her voice. Their eyes met. Something ancient passed between them. Memory surfacing, recognition locking into place. The woman's chest shook as the truth unfolded. "My husband died 3 years ago," she continued, words barely holding together. "Line of duty accident. They told me his partner was reassigned. I never knew where he went. The dog stood slowly, stepped in front of her, and sat, straight-backed, still, attentive, a working posture. Her breath hitched. "He remembers me," she whispered. "I used to come to training sessions. I'd bring coffee, sit on the tailgate. He'd always sit near me. Never touching, just watching." Her hand moved to the dog's chest. He leaned into it. The volunteer wiped at her eyes. "He was retired after the incident," she said. "He never adjusted. Wouldn't bond. Wouldn't leave certain areas. We thought it was trauma." The dog let out a soft sound. Not a whine, not a bark, something lower. Something like release. The woman looked at him fully now. "You didn't refuse adoption," she said softly. "You were waiting." The dog's tail moved once. Slow. Certain. Another siren sounded in the distance. The dog's ears flicked, then relaxed. He stepped closer to the woman and lowered his head gently into her lap. The weight was grounding. Real. Warm. Tears fell freely now. "I didn't know where you were," she whispered into his fur. "I thought you were gone." The dog pressed closer, breathing with her. The volunteer cleared her throat gently. "He's been showing signs of distress whenever sirens go by," she said. "Or when women come in wearing a certain perfume. We couldn't figure it out." The woman laughed softly through tears. "That was mine," she said. "Same brand. I've worn it for years." Everything settled into place. The tension, the blocking, the refusal to let her leave. This wasn't protection from danger. It was protection from loss. The dog lifted his head and looked at her again. Eyes softer now, no longer searching. Home recognized home. "I can't leave him here," she said quietly. No one argued. The dog didn't move. Didn't need to. For the first time since he'd arrived at the shelter, his waiting was over. And for the first time in years, so was hers. The paperwork took longer than anyone expected. Not because there were problems, but because no one was in a hurry to break the quiet that had settled over the office. The dog stayed pressed against the woman's leg as she signed her name again and again. Forms slid across the desk. Pens clicked. The computer hummed softly, patient and indifferent. He didn't watch the volunteers. He watched her. Every time she lifted her hand from the paper, his eyes followed. Every time she paused, he leaned just a little closer. A reminder. Still here. Still together. "You don't have to decide today," one volunteer said gently. "We can give you time to think." "I've had 3 years to think," the woman replied quietly. "I just didn't know what I was missing." The dog's tail moved. A slow, steady rhythm against the floor. Not excitement. Relief. When the final form was signed, the volunteer stood and reached for a set of keys. "All right," she said, her voice warm now. "Let's take him home." The word landed softly. Home. The dog's ears lifted at once. He stood, posture alert but calm, and moved to the door before anyone else did. He paused there, as if remembering the rules, then looked back at the woman. Checking. She smiled through the tightness in her chest. "I'm right here," she said. Only then did he step forward. They walked through the shelter one last time together. Past the kennels. Past the familiar smells and sounds. The dog didn't glance back. Not once. Outside the air was cool and bright. The rain had stopped completely, leaving the pavement dark and reflective. A thin band of sunlight stretched across the parking lot, warming the backs of their legs. The dog stopped at the edge of the curb. Saturday. Watched the street. Cars passed. A truck rumbled by. Somewhere a horn sounded briefly. He waited. She understood. "Okay," she said softly. "We'll take it slow." They crossed together. At her car, the dog hesitated again, nostrils flaring as he sniffed the unfamiliar space. The interior smelled like old paper, coffee, and the faintest trace of lavender. Her scent. He stepped closer. Then, without being asked, he placed his front paws carefully on the seat and climbed inside. The first night was quiet in a way that felt almost unreal. The house hadn't changed much in 3 years. Same narrow hallway. Same muted lamps. Same creak in the floorboard near the kitchen that always announced movement before it happened. What had changed was the silence. Not the empty kind, but the kind that waits. The dog stood just inside the doorway, leash removed now, body still angled as if he expected instruction. The woman set her keys on the small table by the door, the sound echoing louder than it should have. "You're home," she said softly. The dog's ears flicked. Home. He took a few slow steps forward, nails clicking lightly on the hardwood. He sniffed the air carefully. Not hurried, not overwhelmed, just cataloging. Her scent was everywhere. On the couch. On the arm of the chair. Faintly on the blanket folded at the end of the bed. He followed it like a trail. In the living room he stopped. Stared at the far wall. The woman noticed immediately. There was a framed photograph there, slightly faded now. A man in uniform, smiling, arm draped casually over a dog wearing a working harness. The dog's chest rose. Fell. He stepped closer. Saturday. His posture straightened almost without thought. She felt tears rise but didn't fight them. "I kept it there," she said quietly. "I didn't want to forget." The dog didn't look away. After a long moment, he lowered his head and exhaled, a deep releasing breath. Then he stood and turned toward her. Chose the present. That night he didn't pace. Didn't whine. He followed her from room to room, stopping when she stopped, lying down when she sat. When she moved toward the bedroom, he hesitated at the threshold, ears back, eyes searching. "You can come in," she said gently. He stepped inside. Paused again. Then circled once near the foot of the bed and lay down, facing the door. On watch. She slept better than she had in years. The healing didn't arrive all at once. Came in small, careful moments. In the mornings he sat quietly while she poured coffee, watching the steam rise. When the doorbell rang, his body tensed. Not fear but readiness, until he saw her relax. Then he did too. Sirens were harder. The first time one passed close by, he froze mid-step. His ears pinned back. His body stiffened, muscles locking as memory surged forward without warning. She noticed instantly. "It's okay," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "You're safe." She didn't touch him at first. Just stayed. After a few seconds his breathing slowed. His head lowered slightly. He leaned, just enough, until his shoulder brushed her arm. Permission. She rested her hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath. Together they waited for the sound to fade. Each time after it got easier. Not gone. Just softer. They walked the neighborhood in the early evenings, when the light turned golden and the streets grew calm. He stayed close, never pulling, always aware of her position. If a cyclist passed too fast, he shifted between them automatically. Instinct. But not urgency anymore. Trust. Neighbors noticed. "That's a well-trained dog," one man remarked. She smiled. "He remembers who he is," she said. At night, he no longer slept facing the door. After a few weeks he turned sideways. Then one evening, he rested his head on his paws, eyes half closed, body loose. Off duty. She kept his routine gentle. Meals at the same time. Walks at the same pace. Quiet evenings. Sometimes she talked to him. Not commands, not instructions, just thoughts spoken out loud. "I didn't think I'd ever do this again," she admitted once, sitting on the couch while he lay at her feet. "Let someone back in." His tail moved. Slow. Assured. He didn't need to understand the words. He understood the weight behind them. One afternoon, she found him lying beneath the photograph on the wall. Not sitting at attention this time. Just resting there, eyes closed, chest rising and falling in a deep, peaceful rhythm. She knelt beside him. "You did your job," she whispered. "Both of you did." His eyes opened briefly. Met hers. Then closed again. Weeks turned into months. The tension he once carried slowly released its grip. His movements softened. His ears rested more often than they stood alert. He began to play. awkward at first, uncertain, then more freely rediscovering joy without purpose attached. One evening, as rain tapped lightly against the windows, he climbed onto the couch beside her for the first time. Carefully, tentatively, he rested his head against her thigh and sighed. She laughed softly, fingers sinking into his fur. "There you are," she said. The dog closed his eyes. For both of them, healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant remembering without pain. And in the quiet space they built together, between past and present, something steady grew. Not duty, not obligation, but companionship. Chosen, earned, and finally at rest. Spring arrived without asking permission. It came quietly, in longer afternoons, in the soft return of birdsong, in the way light lingered just a little longer on the living room wall. The house seemed to breathe differently now. Less guarded, more open. The dog noticed first. He stood at the window one morning, nose pressed lightly to the glass, watching petals fall from the tree across the street. His tail moved in a slow, thoughtful rhythm. The woman watched him from the kitchen, coffee warming her hands. "You like this time of year," she said. He turned his head toward her. Ears relaxed. Eyes steady. He did. Their days found a gentle pattern. Morning walks when the sidewalks were still cool. Quiet afternoons with the windows cracked open. Evenings spent on the porch, listening to the world slow down. He no longer scanned every sound, only the important ones. When a siren passed now, he lifted his head, assessed, then settled again. No tension, no urgency, just awareness. She noticed the change the first time it happened. Her breath caught. Then she smiled. "That's it," she whispered. "You're okay." He was. Not because the past had vanished, but because it no longer ruled the present. One afternoon, she took him to the old training field on the edge of town. It wasn't official anymore. Just an open stretch of grass where memory lingered faintly in the dirt. The dog stopped at the gate, stood very still. The air carried familiar traces. Dust, rubber, distant oil. Echoes of a life once lived with precision and command. She didn't rush him. She waited. After a long moment he stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately. He walked the perimeter first, nose low, tail neutral. Then he paused near the center of the field and sat. Not at attention. Just sitting. She approached and sat beside him in the grass, their shoulders nearly touching. "You don't have to work anymore," she said softly. "You don't have to prove anything." The dog turned his head, looked at her. Then he leaned into her side. Full contact, grounding not her this time but himself. A choice. The wind moved through the field, lifting the grass in small waves. Somewhere nearby a child laughed. Life moved forward. They stayed there until the sun dipped low and shadows stretched long. At home that evening she pulled out a small box from the back of the closet. Inside were things she hadn't touched in years: medals, folded flags, old photographs. She placed one photo on the table. Her husband, in uniform, smiling beside the dog. She knelt and set it gently on the floor where the dog lay. He lifted his head, looked. His ears flicked once, then settled. No tension, no ache, just recognition. She placed the photo on a lower shelf afterward. Not hidden, not elevated. Integrated. That night the dog slept beside her bed. Not guarding, not watching, but dreaming. His paws twitched slightly. His breathing deep and even. She listened to it until sleep found her too. Months passed. People often stopped them on walks. "He looks happy," they'd say. She always nodded. "He is," she replied. And he was, in the way his tail lifted easily now. In the way his body no longer held itself rigid. In the way he sought affection without permission, resting his head on her knee, curling closer on the couch. One evening, as rain fell steadily outside, the power went out. The house fell into darkness. The dog lifted his head, paused, then moved closer to her, pressing his side against her leg. She laughed softly. "Okay," she said. "Fair." They sat there together, the quiet filled only by rain and breathing and the soft certainty of presence. In that moment, she understood something she hadn't before. He hadn't just been waiting for her at the shelter. He'd been waiting for this. For rest. For belonging. For a place where instinct could soften into trust. And she, without realizing it, had been waiting too. For a companion who didn't ask her to be whole. Who didn't rush her grief. Who understood loss without needing it explained. They had found each other not at the beginning, but at the right time. Later, when she told the story to friends, they called it fate. Coincidence. Meant to be. She never corrected them. The truth was quieter. It lived in the everyday moments, in shared silence, in steady footsteps, in the way the dog glanced back at her before stepping forward, even now. Not because he had to, but because he chose to. Some bonds aren't loud. They don't announce themselves. They simply endure, shaped by loyalty, sealed by understanding, strengthened by time. And once formed, they don't break. They become home.